Welcome everyone to this fourth webinar hosted by 99NICU, your web community for neonatal staff. My name is Stefan Johansson. I'm one of the people behind this web community, 99NICU, and today I'm very happy that we can have Professor Nick Embleton and from Newcastle to present about the Butterfly project, a project I myself learned about quite some years ago. And in fact, we had the nurses Sarah Stevenson and Jane Coach lecturing about this project at our Vienna conference in 2018. So I wish to welcome you all. As you can see, there is a chat window where you can post questions to everyone or only to the panelists. If you would like to speak up, we are also able to upgrade you to a panelist, so you will appear online. You can engage in discussions with us. So thank you, everyone. And now I'm handing over to Vicky Payne, I think.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. Thanks, Stefan. We're going to start with a little poll just to get things started. I just need the sharing function from someone, please, so that I can share the slides. But if you head to, I've put a link in the chat. If you head to the link there, which takes you to Slido, and you'll be able to participate in the poll. So I'll just share my screen and then we can get started, because it'll be interesting to see what everyone's experiences is of this so far, and who you all are as well. So hopefully everyone can see that. So hopefully it should move along, she says optimistically. Okay, so if you head to the Slido link in the chat, you should be able to tell us a little bit about yourself. So just a nice easy question to start with, just tell us who you are. And if you're none of those things, you might have to put it in the chat.
Is the poll active?
It should be. Yes.
Ah, nice.
Is it active now? No nurses. I'm sure there are some. Well, I definitely recognise one of the nurses' names there. There's definitely one nurse here at least. Any more? For any more? Definitely more than 7 people here. So a bit of a split. Is anyone having, if you're having trouble accessing the link, please just say in the chat. I can't see the chat now because I'm sharing my screen. So Stefan, you might have to.
Yeah, I shared the link again. One just need to click on that link and then one comes to the poll.
Shall we move on to the next question?
Yes, please.
She says optimistically. Okay, so how confident do you feel caring for or talking to parents who have lost a co-twin? Oh. I like seeing it move around. It's very exciting. I'm very easily pleased, Stefan. The majority are saying a little underconfident, I feel. No one is committing to being very confident.
Nick, did you take part?
I didn't take part. And even then, I'm not sure what I would say.
Okay, we'll move on to the next one then. The final question, to really gauge how familiar you are with the Butterfly Project already. So if you've already heard of the Butterfly Project, what do you think? Do you think it has useful resources and you use a butterfly symbol in your work? It's useful resources, but you don't use a butterfly symbol at the moment. You don't have never heard of it before, or your NICU doesn't use it, or you think you've joined the wrong webinar and really you should be somewhere else. Hopefully no one clicks that one.
Yeah.
Oh,
Francesca, Alex is here. Can you bring her
Yeah, I'll
to
do it.
panelist? Yeah.
so interestingly, we've got a few more participants coming in now, and you know, a small percentage don't feel that their NICU thinks about it or they haven't heard about it before, and about half-ish do use a butterfly symbol in their work. A few more coming through. So there's a bit of a mix, I think, there for you, Nick, to in your audience to speak to. And I've just put a little link there, so if anyone wants to go and find out a bit more, they can just head to www.neonatalbutterflyproject.org, which I'm sure Nick will go on to tell you a bit more about. We need to make Nick the host. Over to you now, I think, Nick.
Over to me.
Yes.
Good.
Please.
So I hope everybody can hear me. So thanks very much to Stefan and all the team at 99 NICU for inviting me to speak. My name is Nick Embleton. I'm a neonatal paediatrician in Newcastle in the north of England. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about how we developed the Butterfly Project and some of the work we're currently doing. And I'd like to obviously thank all the funders and all the organisations who've supported this in helping us get to kind of where we are now. I haven't got any important conflicts, but I am going to disclose a few personal attributes. That is that as a sort of having been a senior neonatologist for 20 years, I am able to admit that in the past, I definitely underestimated the importance of qualitative research. I'm all bogged down in sort of quantitative research, and a lot of my research has been around nutrition and microbiome, and I tended not to take any notice of qualitative research, but I'm absolutely sure that all of us as clinicians and nurses working on neonatal units need to be very much more aware of the importance of qualitative studies. I significantly underestimated the emotional impact of early pregnancy loss. If I'm honest, I didn't used to think very much about what it felt like perhaps to have an early miscarriage. I certainly underestimated the long-term impact of relatively small actions and behaviours, and I'll come to that later in the talk. And I probably didn't think enough about the power of the various words we used and also our body language. And quite a lot more in addition, and I've now become very interested in how we behave as clinicians and nurses on neonatal units and what we can do better to support parents. So my personal story, just to put it in context, was that, yeah, almost 30 years ago, I decided I wanted to be a neonatologist. And this is the picture of all the things that made me want to be a neonatologist. the challenges of looking after very small babies, how great fun it is to intubate and put umbilical lines in and play with echo machines and look after tiny babies. And I certainly didn't go into neonatology because I was interested in people's feelings. I went into it because of the technical challenges. So I stayed well away from all of these very important emotional aspects of neonatal care. Over the last 10 years, I've been lucky to be involved in quite a lot of research studies around the experience of parents on the neonatal unit, and actually just trying to explain to other people what we've been doing sometimes been a little bit complicated. So if you kind of think about the traditional areas of neonatal study around perhaps end-of-life care or palliative care, there's a lot written about the practical aspects, you know, the importance of good communication and empathy and these type of topics, and a lot written about the ethical aspects, the rights of the baby, the rights of the parents, you know, how we should be behaving in a kind of moral world. So people kind of think about these two kind of broad areas of study, but wrapping around that are all these stories and journeys that parents are making, and that we are making as professionals. And so a lot of our work really has been considering this much wider look. This is the kind of social context, societal norms. I mean, what does society think about the fact that we will turn a ventilator off on a baby who then dies? What do I say to my friends about what my job involves? And what's my professional identity in all these different aspects? And really, this is life. And so I somehow got myself involved in something that was really exploring the most kind of fundamental issues to us as individuals. You know, what is my personal identity? Who am I? But what's my professional identity? And are these two identities separate, or are they the same? And when we started on this 10, 12 years ago, I knew very little about anything sociological or anthropological. And these studies really forced me to think about these questions. You know, did I feel upset or sad if babies were sick or babies who died? Does it feel okay to tell parents of a baby who's going to die that at some point we're going to have to turn the ventilator off? Can I have that conversation and then just sit down and eat a sandwich and coffee as if nothing else has happened? Is that okay to do? How emotionally involved should I get involved in these parents and families? You know, should I maintain a professional distance? Is it right for me to be friends with the parents? And what about after the babies go home? And even more importantly, what about if I cared for a baby who died? Do I maintain contact with these parents? And if so, how would you describe my relationship with these parents? Now, in all the work that we did, almost always parents were very positive about staff, and they talked about these little things that particularly nurses did, but also doctors, these kind of aspects of humanity in a very sort of scary technical world. And parents will tell you that they can remember years later, even decades later, what they were made to feel like when we spoke to them. And so we began to learn that these relatively, what to us seem like relatively small interactions, carry enormous significance for parents, particularly in situations where a baby dies. And many parents live with a sense of regret. And they will say to you, well, what if I just told you to carry on ventilating my baby for a little bit longer? What if I hadn't gone into premature labor? What if you had done this? So a lot of parents have questions, and a lot of them live with regret for many years. But of course, all of us realize that many parents form a very strong bond with staff, and we're in a very privileged position. We're sometimes one of a few people, number of people who actually knew their baby when their baby was alive, if they died at just a few hours or days of life. And I really got to learn that parents don't expect us as staff to be counsellors or psychologists or social workers, but they wanted us, or they liked it if we genuinely cared about them and their baby. And they wanted us just to be normal human beings, to express emotion in the same way that we would do with our friends. And our first research looked at the whole process of withdrawing active intensive care. And it was during this first research study that we wanted to do a second study where we went on to explore the experience of parents where they have twins or triplets, and one of that twin or triplet pair dies and one or more babies survive. And this is what someone said to us: we don't seem to be very good at dealing with both grief and joy. We are great at dealing with the grief if there is just one baby that has died. We're great at being delighted and happy when it all goes fine, but we're not managing the two together very well. And so we embarked on this qualitative study where we had interviewers who were not part of the healthcare team. These were interviewers who were not doctors or nurses. And we spoke to lots of families and lots of staff to understand their experiences and feelings when one baby from a multiple pregnancy died. And after doing these research studies and recording hours and hours of tape and analysing them, we then sat down and conducted workshops. We did about 4 or 5 workshops with parents and staff where we presented the results and discussed them. And then I wanted to make this something more than just a piece of research that sits in an academic journal. So we developed written guidelines and some PowerPoint slides. But I was very conscious that the most powerful thing was actually hearing parents speak directly. So then we got funding to conduct a film project with parents so that people could actually hear their voices and see the emotion in their faces. And we've now developed that further so that next month we're going to be hosting an online course with Futurelearn platform. And I'll tell you a bit more about that later on. So in our research, obviously lots of themes cropped up, but we had to focus down onto a few themes that we felt we may be able to make, do something different about. And these are the 8 themes, and I'll run through these with a few slides after this. The first one was the importance of recognizing twin identity. The next is the importance of acknowledging the bereavement, the death of the baby who died, supporting the parents emotionally, about providing appropriate information, about continuity in care, so ensuring that handover is good and that parents know the staff looking after them, memory making, logistical aspects of occupancy, and then preparing parents for going home. As I say, clearly there were a lot more themes that we've learned, but we had to try and keep this manageable. And this is a picture from our neonatal unit with a very poorly baby here. And when you think about neonatal units, I'm sure this is similar to most of your units as well, and you think about all these things that we discuss on the ward round. How often are we really thinking about what the parents are taking away from this experience? So where are the family emotionally, but also when you look at that complexity, I mean, where are the parents physically? How do they actually get to be with their baby? So the first thing that cropped up was the importance of recognizing twin status. And parents told us that quite often people would forget that the surviving baby came from a twin pregnancy. And almost all the parents we spoke to talked about this, the fact that the conversations used to ignore the fact that this baby was a twin. And of course, that can be made better by reading the notes or the medical records, and particularly making sure that we hand over this information at ward rounds and other times. We need to establish what parents want, and we can only do that by asking them directly. And parents want us to talk about their baby by their name. So it's very important that we find out if this baby had a name and what they would like us to do. And I don't want to tell people how you should do this, but a lot of people have said to me, well, they're saying, I don't know what I would say. So here's just a kind of suggested script that I might use, which might be something like, you know, I know this must be a really difficult time for you, but if you can tell me what's helpful, I can make sure that the other staff know. And if you don't know what you want us to do now, it doesn't matter. We can talk about it another time. But of course, you have to use your own words. It's got to be genuine and feel natural. Many people say, well, it makes me feel a bit uncomfortable. But you need to realize that the discomfort you might have in talking to parents about death and their baby who died, that your discomfort is way smaller than the grief the parents are facing. And it's very important we don't dodge these issues. Parents said they found it incredibly difficult when it appeared that we were just trying to avoid the issue. And so a lot of the time we have these sort of quotes, they forget about him being a twin. The mother then said it's not that they forget, a lot of them just didn't know that the surviving baby was a twin. As I say, we held these workshops, and it was at the workshop that a parent suggested the little blue butterfly, just put a butterfly on the cot, and then they know he's a twin, and it solves the problem. And I honestly can't remember which parent said this to me. I mean, this is about 5 years ago now. But as I sat in the workshop and she said it, a little light bulb went off in my head. And we immediately then proceeded to make these butterfly cot cards. And we made them purple so that we weren't dealing with the issue about them being blue or pink for gender identity. So the idea came from a parent, not from us. And I know lots of other people in other places in the country and the world have also stumbled across this idea. So we're not claiming that we invented this. Our project really has been about trying to disseminate it. But the original idea, as I say, came from a parent. And first of all, we just printed these out on a piece of paper. We laminated it, and then we would stick it on the cot side next to the baby, so that when you walk into the room, it's clear to everybody that this baby is a survivor from a multiple pregnancy. And we then decided that it's important to remember the baby's name. So what the nurses will now do is sit down with the parents and talk about naming. And if the baby had a name, ask the parents whether they would like us to write or to have that name included on the butterfly cot card. And almost every parent wants us to recognize that name. And then we also recognize the importance of parents writing this name themselves. So we now get them the pen and get them to write the name as they would like it on the butterfly sticker. And we made this, indelible ink pens that it won't be washed off if it gets wet or moist inside the incubator. So acknowledging the bereavement is very important. This is a quote from a mum. One of the doctors at the time really quite upset me, and she often said to me, "At least you've still got one." And that was one of the worst things that anyone could possibly say. And this was a quote that I found: before you tell a grieving parent to be grateful for the children they have, think about which one of yours you could live without. So a very powerful quote. But every parent that I've ever spoken to in the situation tells me that everyone has said this to them, not just staff, but family and friends. And they find it really challenging to deal with, because it tends to suggest that the death of the other baby or the survival of the baby can somehow compensate. And so there's a natural tendency for people to want to be positive and focus on the surviving twin, but parents really value being given permission almost to grieve for their loss, whilst at the same time being supported and celebrating their surviving baby if that's what they wish. And parents need to be reassured that this kind of complex mix of emotions that they face is normal in this circumstance. And as I say, if there's one takeaway from the webinar today, it's that you should never say something like, "At least you've still got one." So as I say, if you want just one thing to remember out of this sort of 20-minute webinar, then that would be it. Providing emotional support is clearly important. We had a lot of comments from parents about people who organize the funeral. We might imagine that people organizing funerals are very empathic and supportive, but sadly this isn't always the case. Parents told us about how their baby's name was written in remembrance book, but people smudged the ink. And to them, this was the record, the memory of their baby, and it just seemed like people hadn't taken enough care over it. One of the nurses that was least thoughtful kept calling him, the surviving baby, by his dead brother's name. Again, this comes down to the importance of learning the names of the babies, and that's where, again, maybe the butterfly cot card might come in useful on the neonatal unit. And so many parents said that they felt that staff had become a bit like friends, and I think this emphasizes the importance of normal human interaction. And parents really appreciate compassion and caring. And we came up with this little phrase, it's the little things that count. Parents talk a lot about these small interactions that we as staff may not really think about, but told parents that we genuinely cared. And in general, I think I would say that you're better off talking about these things, even if it makes you feel uncomfortable, than trying to avoid them. It's actually, if you're a caring person, it's difficult actually to say the wrong thing. You may not know exactly what to say, but it's generally better to have the conversation rather than try and ignore things. Parents need appropriate information. We didn't have a clue where he was. I didn't know where he was. This was a comment from a mum whose baby had died, and the baby had been taken away and was in the cool fridge on the neonatal unit, and she was put on the postnatal ward, and she spent all night just not knowing where her dead baby had been put. And so obviously helping parents think through what it is they want to know, perhaps helping them make journals or diaries are important. We heard from parents who perhaps had one baby who had died in utero, and where people hadn't asked them what they wanted to happen after delivery. So going through these things with parents before they go into labour can be important. Parents really like continuity. All of us will recognise that parents bond with some staff better than others. They really like it when familiar staff are on duty, and they really struggle when new staff come on board, particularly if they appear not to know it. And parents find it very painful to retell the story. This doesn't mean that they don't want to talk about it, but they reasonably expect that medical and nursing staff would know what's happened. They would know the names of the babies and if they died, when they died. So they do want to talk about it, but as I say, they don't want to have to tell these painful stories necessarily. They do expect that we should know it. And they often talked again about continuity. And they did particularly want to know if you were a member of nursing or medical staff and you were going to be off duty for a few days. They really appreciated being told that you were going to be off and when you would be back, because they do form these close bonds with you. Now, memory making is a huge topic on its own, and I'm not going to go into it in any great detail, but one of the parents, or a lot of the parents, regretted not having a photo of both their twins together. I mean, clearly that can be difficult if both twins are very sick and ventilated, but sometimes it's possible, or it's at least possible to push the two cots together. So parents often regretted not having memories, physical memories of having the both twins together at any point in time. And parents also, not surprisingly, really regret perhaps never having cuddled a baby. And I think we're all much more aware of that these days. But this importance of trying to help the parents form memories is really important. And so again, all of you will recognize the importance, and all of us will take lots of photos. Particularly think about taking close-up photos. Never delete any photos. It doesn't matter how poor the quality is, just let parents have absolutely everything that you've taken. Of course, they like to keep their name bands and cot cards, but you should keep everything associated with a twin or a baby who died, and ask parents before you throw anything away. Many parents like the idea of shared toys. This organisation for Louis provides these little bears, and it's possible for you to have a little bear that stays with the baby who died and one that stays with the baby who survived. So there are obviously lots of different aspects to this, lots of cultural, religious aspects. But again, this was a big topic for lots of our parents. Handling occupancy is really challenging. A lot of parents talked about how difficult it was to be in a room with surviving twins. They do appreciate that practically this has to be done. And simply offering to have this conversation with parents and explain to them what might happen can be really important. And quite often now, our nurses, if they've had twins in cot spaces next to each other and one of the twins died, a lot of the parents will now ask us to move the surviving baby into the cot space where the baby was who died in some way, perhaps to protect that space or protect the baby's memory. So we're getting lots of logistical issues that may be important to parents. And then preparing parents for going home. Although this may seem to us like progress, that the surviving baby is well enough to go home, many parents really struggle with making this transition. For a lot of people, there was an expectation that things would get better. But for a lot of parents, they suddenly found themselves without that support and without the nurses who they got to know. And one of the things that we came across were these books written by Kate Polly, who's a mum of twin boys, one of whom died, Sam died, and she wrote these lovely books about Sam and Finn. And after having developed the first book, the company can now personalize these books. And so parents can put in the names of their own twins, and they can also come in different skin tones. And these books, I think, allow parents to read to their child. Sometimes they don't know what to say or read. And we've certainly given these to lots of our parents, and the parents have really appreciated them. So lots of things that we could think about helping parents for discharge. So I could talk about this all day, that there are really lots of different themes and lots of practical points. I think the key things are recognizing that as staff, we have a huge impact on the long-term adjustment and coping of these parents. Small things can make a really big difference. So the way that we interact and support parents, what we say, really does make a difference. And this project is very much more than simply providing parents with a butterfly cot card. And then just a brief plug to recognize that, of course, we all have our own limits and what we can cope with. Very important that we look after each other. It should be upsetting. We should feel upset if babies die. It's not normal not to be upset by these types of issues. And generally, most neonatal units have very strong informal networks, and we look after each other very well. But a brief plug there for staff who appear a little bit more on the edge, who perhaps aren't part of the main culture of the unit, and how we can better support them. So these are the 8 themes again. As I say, you can find them all by going to the website. We wrote these guidelines, we've translated them. Perhaps some of you helped me translate them into about 10 different languages at the minute. We're working with Sky High Foundation that was set up by Millie here, who had twin babies, and Sky died soon after birth. So she established this foundation and been working with Millie, who also came up with the idea of the butterfly symbol for the last few years now. And so having done the first set of interviews, we went on and we made these film projects. And so we have lots of film clips that we made with parents. And this is just a quick look at the website. So if you go to the Neonatal Butterfly Project website, you will find film clips that just run for a few minutes each. And I would encourage all of you to kind of go and just listen to these parents. What the parents say is way more powerful than me translating what they said. And this has gone global, so we can track people's access to this website, and huge interest from around the world. And it's been a really kind of great project to be involved in. The butterfly symbol has followed lots of these parents. We created these badges, and so some of the kids will take a little butterfly badge on their to school. They go visiting butterfly houses. the little comfort blankets that the babies have, kind of butterflies on them. Some of the parents have had artwork made of butterflies, tattoos made of butterflies. So the butterfly symbol really seems to resonate with lots of families, but not every family. Clearly in Islamic culture, this wouldn't be an acceptable form of symbolism. And we have contact with some units in the Middle East who actually use a purple heart rather than a purple butterfly. So thanks to everybody, you know, an enormous team of people who've helped with the research over the years, and everybody who's helped with the films. Millie for setting up Sky High, Ruben who did all the film work with us, but of course all the parents who felt able to share their painful stories and experiences with them, and I've kept in contact with lots of these families over the years. And then finally, just to say that we partnered with Futurelearn, who are an organisation that provide online training courses, and we got a grant to develop a course that will be released next month, and this will be accredited for 4 hours of CME. And this is a partnership between Sky High and the University and Hospital here. It's going to be free to access, so anybody can go along and use materials and register. But if you want to get a certificate, then you have to pay an additional upgrade fee, and then your progress through the course is tracked to ensure that you complete the training. And this has been endorsed by at least 20 advocacy organisations from around the world now. So that's going to be available next month. This is what it looks like. We've broken down the whole project into individual steps with videos and articles, questions, and audio clips that will take you through the whole process. And I hope will provide great training for lots of the staff on your units. And I'm going to finish there. So say if you want to go to Futurelearn, you just have to register with the email. It's free to register. And probably this is what it's going to be called, Loss of a Baby in a Multiple Pregnancy. And again, really just to highlight that although this is focused on the Butterfly Project, the themes and the learning are relevant to all aspects of baby loss, stillbirth, miscarriage, and relevant to lots of different specialties, not just doctors and nurses on the NICU. So I'm going to finish there. I hope there's enough time for some questions. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Nick, for your presentation. And before we start off with the questions, I would also like to introduce Alexandra Mancini-Smith. You are a senior neonatal nurse in the UK, and I would say one of the leading experts and contributors around neonatal palliative care. Thanks for joining us as part of the panel.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me today. And I'm really looking forward to the discussions and hope that everybody will participate in it. So thank you again.
Thanks. So Vicky, Katarzyna, Nick, Francesca, Alex, where shall we start? I myself feel a little touched or sort of taken by all these slides and all the messages around them. So I don't know exactly where to start myself. But one thing that comes into my mind related to the introduction by you, Nick, that we enter neonatology with different sort of backgrounds and reasons for doing neonatology. And I am myself like evidence-based medicine guy. But I think this is something more like emotional-based medicine, and it's as important. That's just, and it becomes more and more evident the longer you have been working. I think when you know all the technical stuff, you can start to think about, well, the bigger scene.
I mean, I agree. I mean, I think, you know, when you first go to a neonatal unit as a junior doctor, it's terrifying, and you're desperately trying to learn about how to put drips in and intubate babies and prescribe drugs. And, you know, as you become more senior, you take more and more responsibility. And even when you're first appointed as a consultant or an attending, it's the responsibility is quite daunting. You know, you're making life and death decisions about these babies. And, you know, if we're honest, a lot of neonatologists, particularly the doctors, who are slightly obsessive characters, maybe some sort of slightly autistic traits, love numbers and numbers in boxes, and then we love the technology. We love these echo machines with their clever red and blue colors, and it all looks very, very clever. And I don't think we think about these aspects enough. I think nurses are very different. The nurses come from a very different position. And most of the nurses who come to the neonatal units are not necessarily attracted by the same technical challenge that the doctors are. They come very much driven by a desire to care for the families and care for the babies. So one thing I learned was that actually doctors and nurses on neonatal units are really quite different people in some ways. We're here for very different reasons. And I think doctors generally don't acknowledge these emotional aspects. But as you say, the longer you do it, it's very difficult to do this job and watch parents go through what they go through and care for babies who die without recognizing how that makes us feel as individuals. Alex, I mean, you've worked in this area for longer than most people. I mean, I don't know if you want to chip in there.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting what you say is that I think there are nurses that are attracted to the high tech, the technology driven, the real medicine and the science. However, I think it's by nature of our different roles where as a nurse you would traditionally be alongside that family and that baby for 12 hours a day, a minimum, and you might be working for 3 or 4 days in a row. So that close proximity where you're really getting to understand the intricacies of what's important for families, how they tick, what's going on in the background, what's going on at home, is something very, very different. And I think certainly, thanks, Nick, for pointing out I've been in this for longer than most. But there is an element that we can remember the days when parents would also be next to the cot for 12 hours a day. But of course, that has changed significantly because of the pandemic and the restrictions for the ability for parents to be with their babies for that length of time. But certainly from a nurse's perspective, I would say it's that close proximity that you're with families day in, day out, and consultants would not, and registrars and even SHOs wouldn't have that same contact. And so invariably you are understanding the emotional aspects, possibly a little bit more in tune with the families at those times. And that's not a criticism, it's just the diversity of our roles.
May I just make one comment to all the attendees? If you want to post any questions to Nick or Alex, please use the chat function in the lower right corner. You can, and we sort of push them forward to Nick and Alex.
So there's a comment from Carla, who is from Mexico. So welcome, Carla. Thanks for joining. And she says that it's not really a question, but she wanted to congratulate everyone being involved. She thinks it's a wonderful initiative that will benefit the mental health of parents in the NICU. And I guess what I was thinking when I listened to that, and I think you touched on it, Nick, towards the end when you talked about the different cultural meanings of symbols, and that you've translated it into lots of different languages, is how you found this, I guess, how this work has translated across the world, and if you've kind of had experiences in different places.
Yeah, I've been lucky to speak to, visit lots of different settings and speak to people, and it's impossible to imagine that in any setting parents could lose a baby from a multiple pregnancy and not feel the same set of emotions. But how that's approached clearly has, a cultural context and perhaps religious context. You can imagine in certain societies women are not encouraged to speak about these things. You only have to go back 20 years in a lot of UK and Europe when you were encouraged not to talk about your miscarriage or your stillbirth, just get on with it and have another baby. And so I imagine that these questions must be, or these challenges must be really difficult in societies where women don't have such a voice. But also men. I mean, it's not traditional for men to talk about these types of emotions. When I've done bereavement follow-up, sometimes the dads decide not to come. you will speak to the mum, but the dad will choose not to come along, or certainly not to express emotion. And when you do get fathers, they will tell you how difficult it is for them to find male friends who are able to even mention a baby who died. So you're right. I mean, there are lots. I mean, this is a sort of massive area of discussion, I suppose. It's much wider than simply how do we support parents in this very specific circumstance. But you know, when you're thinking about how parents get on after, you know, miscarriage and stillbirth, these are still topics that aren't widely discussed, even over here.
Thanks. I don't know if Lisa Leopard is here. I know that she's here, but I don't know if she's got a little question mark, like she's asking a question. And I wondered, Lisa, if you have a question, do you want to unmute yourself and ask Nick or Alex?
I've just unmuted Lisa. Let's see. If
Am I
she-
unmuted?
Yes.
Oh, hi. I don't know why I've got a question mark beside me, just probably because I'm a very strange person. And hey, you know, that's me, Alex, isn't it, really? I suppose the thing I was going to ask you, Nick, was actually multiculturally, when you were saying about the butterfly not being used in Islamic culture for different reasons, how do you approach that conversation with Islamic families when actually sometimes they don't want any memorabilia whatsoever for the baby that's actually died? I mean, I know it varies from family to family, so I'm not using that as a blanket statement, but how would you approach a family around having some memorial for, you know, having a symbol, a purple symbol for their baby?
Let me be honest, I don't know. And actually what's happened now is that the nurses tend to do this. I mean, I'm very interested in it all, but it's normally the nurses who are sat next to the bed or the incubator, or the midwife with the parent when she's realized she's having a miscarriage. And it's often not the doctor. I'm often not the one now to have this conversation. I will acknowledge it when I see the butterfly and I know something's happened, but often it's not me. I think what I would just say to people is that we have to recognize that everybody's different, and nobody is offended by having the butterfly symbol explained to them, and acknowledge that this may not be what they want, or, you know, and go through the alternatives. As I say, it was a unit in Doha that decided to use a purple butterfly, and I suppose if I was sat with parents who are Muslim or another faith where symbolism might be challenging, I think I probably would explain about the use of the purple heart symbol. So of course the butterfly in Judeo-Christian culture has these you know, symbolism of rebirth and life and this stuff, so it works great for our cultures in general, but not for everybody. But I've also had parents who were Seventh-day Adventists, and they thought that any kind of physical memento token was to them irrelevant. They weren't offended by us offering to do footprints and have a purple butterfly and do all the kind of locks of hair that we would do normally. They weren't offended by it, but they said, like, it just means nothing to me. Like, my baby's soul is in heaven now. He's left the physical earth. We don't want this stuff. They were fine about it.
Yeah.
And we can never know what parents want. Yeah.
And will you touch on that sort of those conversations, sort of beginning those conversations? I know that worries a lot of people, doesn't it? In your training, will that perhaps be part of the training about how to begin those conversations with families?
Yeah, we've acknowledged, we do sort of address it briefly in the course. I mean, unfortunately, this, you know, we literally could talk about this for hours. So much comes out, and so many people I now know who've had multiple pregnancies, or friends where this has affected them. I don't think people realize necessarily how common it is. And I wanted to make this course just 4 hours. I felt if I started making it 12 hours, people just aren't going to do it. I wanted to make it short enough, because the problem that we have here is that this is an echo chamber. All of you are interested in this subject, and that's why you've joined the webinar, and very few of you are actually going to learn very much from it, because you're already people thinking about these issues. The challenge is, how do we get to those people, you know, colleagues who we may love dearly, who just simply don't get these things. So trying to keep the training course short was, perhaps I could help, get more people into it. But what I would like to do is have a series of spin-outs from the Futurelearn course, which probably would be podcasts. And the way that I would do this then is just to find staff or parents from another setting and have a conversation with them about it, and just hear what they have to say. I don't have the answers necessarily.
No, I think that would be a brilliant idea. I think hearing from, always hearing from parents in different situations is so impactful, isn't it? So, and we learn so much from them. So thank you for that.
Yeah, and as I say, like, please go and have a listen to these films. I mean, like, I'm bored of hearing myself talk about these things. I've never experienced these things, and I'm not the right person. But every time I listen to some of those films, I'm still affected by them emotionally. It's very difficult to see people who I now know so upset by what happened to them. So please go and have a listen. You only need to listen to a few minutes to get some of what they want to say to us.
I think I just wanted to come in with the comment about the symbols, because I think, moving forward again, Nick, developing the online course is so hard, isn't it? As you say, there's so much information, but it's a starting point. It's to start thinking about things slightly differently. It's about making it accessible, and then thinking again about the symbol is that it's about the acknowledgement. So possibly I haven't personally been in that situation, but for cultures or people where the butterfly isn't appropriate, we could ask them what would be helpful for them, if they'd like people to know, if they would like to have that same acknowledgement. And I think I did see a quick comment from Nadia Leek. I can see Nadia is here today, and Nadia's strapline, I think, is ask the question. And I think that really is the basis of everything that we do. Ask a parent what they would like.
Thanks, Alex.
It's all really powerful stuff, isn't it? As you said, we're all people who are interested, Nick, and Alex, that's why we're here. But it is really powerful, and I think we've just got a few more minutes left, but there's a couple of things in the chat that I think we'd like to highlight. So I don't know if Claudia would like to unmute herself and maybe ask her question. Claudia's from Argentina. Welcome.
Claudia is unmuted right now. If you would like to ask your question yourself.
Are you there, Claudia? Oh, we can't hear you, can we? I don't think.
I don't think so. But yeah, maybe we can read out loud the question.
Yeah, Claudia's asked, what is the main impact seen on doctors and nurses after the death of a baby? I don't know, maybe Alex wants to take that one. I don't know.
Okay, I think, I mean, if I answer it really truthfully, in my experience and time, is that my focus now is on training people, nurses, doctors across the board, spending time and offering safe spaces to be able to discuss the impact. But I think to truthfully answer that, I would say they absorb, and it's a blanket statement, but they absorb the pain, they absorb the distress. And it does present itself in some way later on, and it may be years before it presents itself. But I think, again, with time, what we've learned is the importance of ensuring there is that space to be able to be present, to be able, not everybody wants to discuss their feelings, and we need to acknowledge that too. But I think it's about offering that space within our workplace. And really, even before the pandemic, the absolute focus was on ensuring staff had those outlets to be able to express their pain, their sadness, and that it's okay. And you need to have that acknowledgement and that the permission, you need to have it from the senior people. And now that we're all been around for a while and we are the senior people, it's about us giving that space and time that it's okay. but certainly I think we're learning. We're not quite there yet, but we are learning. And I think also hearing from parents, the majority of our training and learning is with parents absolutely central. It's how we learn best when we hear feedback, is that parents, some parents say they're comforted by seeing how the impact that their baby and the experience had on us. But other parents want us to be professional and want us to, again, it's that balance that we need to circumnavigate. But I don't know if I really answered that question well, Claudia, but it was, I think we absorb it the majority of the time. And please feel free, anybody, to disagree with me.
I think you're right, and I think we perhaps don't, particularly doctors, and particularly male doctors, I think don't often acknowledge actually how important these things are. I mean, as I say, I never went into neonatology to listen to how other people felt about these things, but I've recognized how important it is, and it's changed me as a person to almost be honest to myself that it is okay to be upset by these issues. But as you say, Alex, there's a balance. Parents do need to know that we also feel upset by these things, but we shouldn't burden parents with our own grief. And I do see instances perhaps where staff almost smothering parents and giving parents this burden that they're really, really upset, and I don't think that's appropriate. So finding that balance is important, but generally I think people need to acknowledge these issues much more than they do, and acknowledge that it's okay to be a normal human being. It shouldn't feel okay to see babies really sick and poorly and for them to die and you not to feel upset. You're a pretty bizarre person if you don't acknowledge that's true. And I think we do feel that, but perhaps we don't always acknowledge to ourselves that that's how the job makes us feel sometimes.
Yeah, I think it's really easy, isn't it, as well, in the busy NICU environment, certainly in the UK experience anyway, to have something like that happen, and then you're on to the next job because you've got that prescription to write, or that other baby that's still
Absolutely
needs you to do something for it. So yeah, I wondered, I know that we're out of time really, but do you think perhaps we could ask Mariana to unmute herself and just share her experience that she's put in the chat, because I think that's touched a lot of us that have read it. I don't know, Mariana from Brazil, if you're able to unmute yourself.
Mariana, you're unmuted right now.
Hi all. Hi Nick. Thanks for your talk. It's such a beautiful thing to hear talking about it. We had this incredible experience last month. We always applaud the babies who are going home, because it's a way to cheer the family that's going home and starting the life with the baby who left the NICU. And last month we lost a baby to NEC, and she was an incredible fighter. She fought for a whole month, and those parents went home and came back the next day, and they asked the team together to applaud their baby, because they thought she was such a fighter and she deserved it, and in a way she was going home. And so we did that, and while we were waiting for the parents, you could hear a pin fall on the floor because everybody was silent and everybody was on the corridor. And so they entered and everybody applauded them, and it was such a beautiful and sad and powerful moment. And it brought closure to us, the whole team, and to this family. And we had a bond, and they took back their baby's mementos. And it was such a small thing to do, but I'm sure they're going to remember, we are going to remember that forever.
That's absolutely beautiful. And I wonder why we don't do that. And I think I know that we're out of time, but when we do talk about celebrating the birth of a baby and what people lose, what parents lose when they have their baby prematurely, they don't have the balloons, they don't have the cards. And we do discuss that a lot in our training. sessions about we should be celebrating the life, even if it's the babies have come along early. So beautiful to celebrate the life. Thank you for sharing that, Claudia.
I'm not sure there's a dry eye hearing that story. I thought it was lovely. Mariana, thank you.
Thanks.
I think maybe Stefan, do you want to close? Is that
Yes, I would like to thank everyone for attending and Nick and Alex for joining. But before we close, I would like to hand over to Francesca because this project, the book that you spoke about, Nick, the publisher came back to us and asked if we wanted to do something about it. So please, Francesca.
So I'm just going to round things up because we have the opportunity to give out one of the books that you mentioned, Nick, to one of our attendees. And since we're just going to do this by random, I don't know if I should share my screen to show that we're just, yes, okay. I see you, Vicky. So let's see if I can do that. Share screen. So this is now the list of all the people. I'm just going to randomize for one of the 12 people. So this is just on the internet random. Number generating number 13 wins. Let's see the person. We have Ellie Hodgson. So these are all the people who wanted to participate. Can you see the number? I think it's easier if you check. Can you check? Because I have to switch screens so much. If Ali is in attendance?
No, I don't think so.
No.
Okay, so this might take a while. Looking at number 111 is Laura Richardson.
No, she's not here.
Okay, so what's the chance of finding somebody in the next 5 minutes? Emily May. Maybe we'll have to work on our rep.
Emily is attending.
Yes. Excellent. So Emily, we'll send you a link on how you can get the book. Congratulations. So Stefan, back to you.
Okay, thank you. So I would just like to ask Nick and Alex for like a final advice or comment, where to go, what to do, please.
Yeah, I think my comment or advice would be to speak to your colleagues. I don't think most people attending the webinar today need necessarily to I'm sure you're already thinking about it, but all of your recognized colleagues on your unit who perhaps could be encouraged to be a little bit more emotionally aware about what they're involved in. And so my advice would be see if you can think of ways of making this part of a teaching session or educating your colleagues or how we actually work with people who don't naturally get these type of issues.
Thank you.
And I would absolutely echo what Nick has said. Now that we have access to Zoom, Teams, this platform, it's so easy. And it's almost, as Nick says, and have them in teaching sessions, but doing it quite, I suppose it's just thinking about being a bit creative and saying, I was on this webinar, it's an international webinar, here we are, we've got half an hour, let's just share some information. And it's almost putting it in front of people, making it so accessible that they can't say no. Almost it sounds a bit forceful, but sometimes we need to do that.
Thank you. Okay, then I would like to close this hour with you, and thank you so much for doing this with us. It was very touching and also helpful, I think. I mean, we are all attending here aware of this project, but I think we have a role to become ambassadors for all the thinkings that are around those quite difficult, almost everyday situations, I would also say, at least in the level 3 NICUs. So thank you so much, and yeah, I wish you a pleasant evening, and so thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Stefan. All the best.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank
Bye
you.
then.
Bye.
Thanks,
Bye bye.
everybody.
Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye bye.